Hello Year 9, today what we're going to be doing is drawing on some collaged backgrounds that you create in your lesson today. Okay, so here are some things that I've drawn using a milk jug and an attachment from a coffee machine. Notice the different variety of backgrounds that I've used, and you are going to be creating those today and drawing. So you will need some unusual papers, some paper to draw on or to collage onto. And you're going to need some glue, some scissors. If you have masking tape, that would also be great. You could start off by tearing some of the unusual papers that you've got. I've just used some strips here to tear down and glue onto the paper. You're then going to be using this background to draw over the top. So I've used glue to attach the torn strips. Make sure that you glue all sides of the bit of paper before you glue it down. When you come to draw over the top, it makes it really difficult to draw because all of the edges are lifting up. When you're tearing, if you tear from side to side, and you'll get a good kind of torn edge to then add to your work. I'm just using strips here just to add a little bit of interest to the background in which I'm working on. Next lesson we're going to be using different materials such as watercolour and coffee to create backgrounds, but today it's all about collage. Get a pair of scissors, and when you've finished one section you can cut off all of the loose edges. Now that's ready to draw over the top. The next background that I'm going to create isn't using torn edges, it's using straight cut edges and shapes. So the last one where we used torn edges, that might be nice to use if you are drawing organic shapes like flowers or fruit, things with curves. But if you're drawing something more mechanical with straight edges, then measuring out strips and cutting straight edges or measuring out shapes and cutting might be more appropriate for your project. You can decide, this is your work. Okay, so I've measured and drawn a line to create a sort of rectangle that I'm using to collage on top. I was just planning out there the composition that I'm going to use. This time I'm going to use the strip going in a diagonal. So I'm just pressing that down, making sure it's all stuck. I'm selecting the different type of paper that I'm going to use next. So again, this is the inside of an envelope, but just a different pattern. I'm measuring and marking out a rectangle to use to add onto my paper. Drawing a line, and then I just use the scissors to cut. That way I get a straight edge. If you have a knife and mat, you could use that, or if you have a paper cutter. So add that next to your piece of paper. You can choose your composition. You can choose whether you have straight edges or torn edges or shapes. That is up to you. So next I'm going to be using the other side of the envelope there, and notice I'm using a cutting mat, and I've got this tool here which is a circle cutter. You may not have one of these, so you don't need to use it. The circle cutter isn't quite working on that piece. So I'm going to just use part of it. Okay, I've got this circle that I'm then going to measure a straight line and just use half of that circle. And the brown paper, the brown side is going to be stuck, so it's showing on my collage. So again, here I'm using shapes, I'm using strips, but all of those edges are straight and sharp, cut with scissors. So you decide which is more appropriate for your project. Again, I need to use the scissors just to cut off those loose edges, and this prepared ground now is ready to draw on. I'm going to create a drawing over the top of this. Just put both of those to one side, and then you can gather up the objects that you want to draw. Now this section here won't be for everyone, but I'm creating two more backgrounds that are a little bit more unusual. I went hunting around the house to see what I could find to print onto the surfaces rather than cutting up and collaging. So first of all, I'm using a little bit of collage to add some interest. I'm using some graph paper that I'm tearing, and then I just use some glue to stick it down. Using this technique, you could also use layering. So once I've stuck this graph paper down, I'm going to use a little bit of masking tape over the top, which will add an extra layer, and the masking tape is quite transparent. You can see through it, so you can see part of the graph paper, which adds a nice effect. And also you can draw over the top of masking tape, which is really important. Normal sellotape you won't be able to use for this. It'll have to be a paper-based tape. So I'm just cutting off those edges ready to use. Now, what I found when I was looking around the house, which you may not have, was a date stamp. Sometimes they're used in library books and things. I've got an ink pad here, which I'm going to use. Now, if it was a date stamp, that could be really relevant to the project. You could note the date in which you were drawing, with it being 2020, being lockdown. That could record a really significant date for your project. So just pressing down on the ink pad and pressing down onto the page, making quite an abstract kind of effect. Not everybody is going to have one of these, I understand that, but this was just if you had anything lying around the house that you could use. I also found some letter stickers, and I'm peeling those off and sticking them on the page and spelling out words, keywords related to my project. Now, because today I'm drawing things relating to coffee and a coffee machine and a jug in particular, I'm using the word pour. You can pour out of a jug, so I'm just using those letter stickers. I'm not sticking them down exactly in a line so they're straight. I quite like that. I like the way that they are stuck down in straight in a line. Next, I'm going to use these letter stamps, what I found. I'm just going to use a couple of strips of masking tape to add a little bit of detail. I'm tearing those up again so it's not that straight edge, it's that tone sort of look. Sticking those down. I'm just measuring out a rectangle of graph paper to use as well. Quite like that sort of mix of pattern and shapes. And over the top of this section, I'm going to add the word steam. Steam is often used when you're steaming the milk, and with it being a milk jug and a attachment from a coffee machine, I thought that was quite relevant to this piece of work that I'm doing. So I'm selecting the stamps to spell out the letter steam, and I'm using a red ink pad. With these kind of stamps, if you press down quite hard onto the paper, you include the background of the printing block. So if you just dab in the ink and press down quite lightly, you should get the letter. Now, I understand not all of you will have these kinds of things around the house, but if you do, think about how you could use them. And if you haven't got them, just stick to collaging the different kinds of papers. And that might really simply be just a different colour paper that you arrange on the page. And drawing over the top. Okay, so I've got the word steam there, and I've got one that says pour, and I just need to trim off those masking tape edges. And now I have 4 different backgrounds that I could draw on. And those drawings I showed you at the start of this video. So there's the objects that I then go on to draw. So in today's lesson, I want you to create a couple of different backgrounds that you are going to draw on. I did 4. That would be good for you to do as well. Good luck.